incident, the likes of which the Ummah has never seen, occurred. After the Fajr prayer finished, this day, the 29th of November 1979, which corresponded to the 1st of Muharram 1400 Hijrah. After the Fajr prayer finished, led by Shaykh Muhammad ibn Subayl, who is still one of the Imams of the Haram, immediately after this, a few gunshots were heard inside of the Haram. And then there was some commotion in the front lines, and a person stood up and grabbed the microphone that Imam Subayl was leading the Fajr prayer with. A number of other people stood up and overpowered the guards surrounding Shaykh Subayl. And then this announcer started speaking. This announcer started announcing. He started talking about the corruption of the present state and regime, and the evils that were rampant in society, and the fact that so many of the signs of the Day of Judgment were being fulfilled in front of their eyes. And he then began to mention that the Prophet ﷺ predicted that a mujaddid, a renewer of the religion, would come every 100 years. And he then mentioned the hadith about the Mahdi, this figure that will come towards the end of times, when all of the earth is filled with injustice and evil. And he said, this is that time. And he then said, we have the Mahdi in our midst. And he told a certain person to stand up and called him to the microphone. And he said, O Muslims, this is your Mahdi. Give bay'ah to him. Give the oath of allegiance to him. And this person, whose name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, from the tribe of Qahtan, the pure tribe of Quraysh, of the descendants of Quraysh. This person, Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Qahtani, stood there, and the announcer, whose name was Juhayman ibn Sayf al-Utaybi, the announcer then demanded from all of the Muslims in the Haram that this is the Mahdi. He is standing between the Rukn and the Maqam, between the Hajar al-Aswad and the Maqam of Ibrahim. He's standing there. And he says this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ said, that the Mahdi will stand between the Hajar Aswad and the station of Ibrahim. And he said this person, his name is Muhammad, just like the Mahdi's name will be. And his father's name is Abdullah, just like the Mahdi's father's name will be. And he shall be from the tribe of Quraysh, just like this person is from the tribe of Quraysh. And he mentioned all of these conditions. And he said, you must now give bay'ah to this man. The Muslims of the Haram, the average Muslims, most of you have been there. Many of them could not even understand what is happening. They didn't understand Arabic. Others were totally bewildered and confused. What is happening? Gunfire, gunshots. When they tried to leave in the chaos and pandemonium, they found that the doors of the Haram had been barricaded shut. And each of these doors was armed. Armed guards stood there, not of the Haram, of the army of Juhayman al-Utaybi. And lo and behold, for the next week and a half, for the next so many days, the Haram itself, the Kaaba, was held hostage. The Kaaba was held hostage, and nobody was allowed to enter or leave for some days, until finally Juhayman's group allowed the other Muslims to leave who did not want to remain there. They could not feed them and take care of them, so they allowed the other Muslims to go after 3-4 days. But they themselves, the army of Juhayman, the quantities have differed. Some ulama said, some historians said 200, others said up to 1,000. We don't know the exact quantity of the army that he had assembled, but they had taken the Haram hostage, and they did not allow any Muslim to come in. And for all of these days, tawaf around the house was stopped. The call for prayer was stopped. The jama'at was stopped. This has hardly ever occurred in the history of the Ummah. The last time this occurred was in this incident, 1979. And as the sun rose up and dawn broke into the early day, the Saudi police and the Saudi authorities were totally confused as to what to do. They didn't even understand firstly what is going on, what is happening. A total surprise. And when they sent policemen, when they sent some of the army to try to find out, Juhayman had stationed snipers on the minarets of the Haram. These tall, towering, minarat of the Haram. He had stationed marksmen, expert rifle, people who could shoot down anybody who's coming. So any policeman, any guard came, and he was killed immediately. blood was shed in the haram. And so the authorities began to have meetings, negotiations. They didn't understand even what is happening. It took them a whole day to figure out this was a group who claimed to have the Mahdi in their midst. Sheikh Subayl himself, when all of this is happening and the announcements were taking place, immediately he understood this is a group of fanatic extremists. And while all of this is taking place, he lost himself in the crowd. He did not want to be held hostage for no reason. And he managed to escape wearing the clothes and the garment of a woman, wearing the hijab and the abaya of a woman. He managed to escape in the crowd. And he was one of the main sources of information to the authorities, describing to them what exactly was happening inside of the haram. The Saudi authorities tried certain tactics, but the people in this inside the haram were adamant. They would not leave until the royal family abdicated, until they gave up the power, until all of these conditions were met. And of course these conditions would never be met no matter what anybody does. So the authorities decided that they're going to storm the Kaaba itself. They're going to send the military, the army in to fight these people. Therefore, after around 8 or 9 days, they sent in the elite military. They sent in paratroopers. They sent in army tanks. The tanks went up the same stairs of the haram that we all have used. They went up these steps and they broke down the barricaded doors of the haram. And hundreds of military men stormed inside the very structure that we know. It is the same structure. It wasn't rebuilt again. And a war ensued inside the Kaaba, inside the haram itself, in the shade of the Kaaba. A war ensued. And what happened was that the followers of Juhayman al-Utaybi, they barricaded themselves in the basement of the haram. Those of you who have gone recently, you know that there is a basement inside the ground floor. From the Kaaba, you walk up the steps. Immediately as you walk up the steps, you will find other steps going down. For many years, those basement doors were shut. Those of you who went throughout the 80s, those doors were shut. You saw them, but they were never opened. Early 90s shut. Only recently, when the memory died down, when all of that fear and whatnot was finally quelled, only recently the doors have been opened. What happened was the army of Juhayman, or the followers of Juhayman, they took shelter in these basements. And the advantage of this was that these basements, they only had one way in, which was those stairs. So any person tries to come, they can immediately shoot and kill him. So hundreds of people were barricaded inside this basement. And the authorities figured out that there was no lack of water, firstly. Well, the water was available. Where was the water coming from? Zamzam. And then there was no lack of food, because these people had carried in bags of dates. And they questioned, where did they get the guns from? They figured out that the guns had come in the Fajr prayer, the Fajr of the same day. They had brought in bodies, janazas, but there were no bodies inside those green sheets. They were full of semi-automatic weapons, rifles and guns. Instead of people and corpses, there were weapons meant to create corpses. This is what those people brought in. And in those days there wasn't much checking. Those of you who have lived in Arabia in the last 20 years, you all know how strict it is. You cannot leave your house without iqamah. You cannot enter a city without permission. In the 70s there was no such thing. It was this incident that changed the entire system of Arabia. It was this incident that caused so much panic, for good reason, that they changed the entire system of people residing in Arabia and coming in and coming out. It was this one incident. So at that time, they could just walk in carrying these buyers, the janazas. Once upon a time, nobody checked. Now if you try walking in, you need to show a piece of paper from the government. This is really a dead body. There must be a doctor certified. This is a legal procedure. Back